Well, we've decided to make some potato soup. It's a staple that's been, at least in the South, for a long time. Kept a lot of people alive when things were tight in the Depression and further on. And what you need is some nice onions. Unfortunately, these are just yellow. We usually use sweet onions only. And you need to have a lot of potatoes. This recipe is about 6 or 7 potatoes, and that's about, we're not going to use that many onions, but maybe 1.5 large onions chopped up. We use this chopper, Vidalia chopper, to have uniform pieces. A big pot, stick of butter. And I'm chopping up the ingredients. My wife and I both make this. Hers seems to taste better than mine. I don't know why, but it does. So I'm going to do this video of her making her potato soup, so yours will taste better than mine. Another thing you might want to remember when you are cut up potatoes for whatever you're going to use them for, and you're not going to cook them right away, you need to immerse them in water, because I don't know whether it's called oxidation or whatever, but they will start turning red, and that would be appetizing. Most of it will rinse off, but not all of it. And if you soak it in water, it will they'll stay just like they were cut. Pretty simple recipe, just a few other ingredients really. And you can also put celery in it, and we may chop up some celery. We did decide to put celery in it, and that is 3 stalks, and they weren't really huge stalks. And you have to remember, when you use celery and onions and you have to saute them, you have to start sauteing the celery first, because they take a long time to tender up, and the onions don't take much time at all. And you can do them together. You just do these first and then do the onions. Put the onions in with it, and then add liquid to stop it from cooking. My bride and I have both been cooking for a long time, so we don't generally measure when we cook a lot of things, because we know about what's right and how the texture of what we're cooking is, the thickness, the times. Since we're putting this recipe out that people might want to use it, we're going to actually have to measure the measurements out for you. The ingredients are right here. You're going to need potatoes, celery, it's an option, onions, salt, pepper, butter, a chicken bouillon cube, this natural chicken broth that's 99% fat free, some flour, milk or half and half. We've got the eye on. We're going to put the butter in it. We're going to saute the celery first because it takes longer. Then we're going to add some onions, and this is just over a cup of celery. This container holds 8 quarts. Now that's totally full, and you're not going to have it totally full, so it's maybe would be 7.5 quarts. It's like if you buy a can of soup today. Ooh, I dropped one on the floor. It's 10.5 ounces, so just rough it off at 10 ounces. We're going to have 200 and some ounces here, which is like buying 22 cans of this, and I just bought a can of soup and it was $1. So it's like $22 worth of soup you're making for 6 potatoes, and we may not use all of them. 2 big onions, I know we're not going to use all those. 3 stalks of celery. This is probably the most expensive thing on the table. And some butter, a bouillon cube, and some milk, or half and half. So the payback's pretty good, especially if you're buying cans of soup. So my bride is going to put some butter in this. I'll get her a knife.
I don't need a knife.
She isn't going to need a knife. And she whispered that because she doesn't like being on the videos much. 2 cooks in the same kitchen spoils the pot.
Waste not, want not.
That's what you did during the war when things were rationed. You didn't leave an ounce on the wax paper. Now if you want to cut that in patties, it would melt quicker. And then goes the celery. 1 stick of melted butter. That was just over a cup. That's going to have to saute for
a while, till it gets soft.
Probably 8-10 minutes. And then you just throw the onions on it because it takes less time, and by the time the onions are translucent, the celery is perfect. We just added 1½ cups of chopped onions, and now that's going to have to saute for probably about 5 or 6 minutes. The nice thing about an onion, it will turn translucent. Right now you can see white in them, and they'll be translucent when they're sauteed. Some pretty medium-high heat. And the flour is 3/4 of a cup, and my bride makes a paste with it, which will come later. And you do have to stir this from time to time and then level it out. You don't want anything laying up on the edges. You want it all in the bottom of the pan. Frame. We started at 2 o'clock. It's ready, sauteed perfect. You can see how translucent the onions are. See how the celery's lighter color. And to stop the cooking process is when you add the chicken broth. Tell them.
I'm putting in my bouillon cube here. I've turned the heat up to high. I'm going to bring the broth to boil, and then I'm going to put in the potatoes.
To save time bringing it to a boil, we use a lid, and then once we put the potatoes in it, you would use the lid to bring it up to boil again. And we've been using this a long time. This was a wedding present we got. A long time ago, 46 years. Well, this June. Like I said, we don't measure, so I measured out 8 cups of potatoes. We may use more than that. You want any more in there? Soup?
I'd like to try and use most of the potatoes that we cut up.
All right. I'll measure out some more. And I measured out 4 more cups.
That's a total of 12.
And they will cook down some. And then we'll put the lid back on it because it'll take the potatoes a while to cook.
It won't take that long. And actually, I'm going to add just a little bit of water to make sure that all the potatoes are covered.
All right, why don't you do that? All covered. We're now at 229. It's come to a boil.
And I'm going to turn it down some and set the timer for 3 minutes because the potato cubes are small and it doesn't take them very long to cook. If they overcook, you're going to have mashed potato soup.
Back in 3 minutes.
All right, rather than taking some of the potatoes and mashing them and using that to thicken the soup, I use a flour paste to thicken my soup. And so you pour some in, but not all of it, and you want to stir it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with so many lumps that it would be just about impossible to get all the lumps out. And I just add a little bit at a time and keep stirring. I'll try and keep the lumps out as I keep adding more liquid. If I left it at this thickness, when I poured it in, I would end up with dumplings instead of thickening. So I just keep adding a little bit more until it gets to about the right consistency. I will need to add a little bit more, I'm sure. It should almost pour in, but not as thin as milk or something like that.
More like a pancake dough or batter.
Yeah. Just a little bit more maybe.
And she started with a cup of water because she does this by feel, so we need to give you a reference of how much liquid to use, but it is still a feel.
Maybe a little more than half a cup, or right around half a cup total. And that's about the thickness that I'm looking for. You can use more or less depending on how thick you want your soup.
See, there's a half mark, so she used about half a cup. And that took 3 minutes. And she wants to taste one.
I'm going to put the timer on for 1 more minute.
And what are you looking for?
I just want the potato to be tender but not mushy.
So it,
And that piece that I tried was a little on the chewy side.
back in a few seconds.
All right, the timer just went off. And again, I usually do this kind of by sight. I'm using some half and half. About 2 cups of that here. And then I will use some milk. Depending on whether you like more soup or more potatoes. I'll put probably 1 more cup of milk in. Now I'm going to stir in my flour paste here.
When it was boiling, she'd cut the temperature down to stop the boiling. Now that she's put the cold milk in there, she is bringing the temperature back up.
I want to stir that around. Again, I don't want to end up with dumplings or strings of
A big
cooked
glob
flour.
of
Yeah.
cooked flour laying on the bottom.
Get the last goodie out of the bowl. And then I just stir it from time to time, not necessarily constantly, but you want to make sure. This is a pretty heavy pot. Otherwise, if it were something like a Riverware pot, you would need to stir it constantly or the flour is going to stick to the bottom. And you just cook it until it thickens.
We're at 237. Back in a bit. Alright, we had to mix up some more because it wasn't thick enough. We did the same thing she did before with another half a cup of flour to get the right consistency. And we'll have the final measurement because she may or may not use all this. And at this point in time, she's turned the heat down to about the middle. But she's added a cooler liquid of cold water and flour, so she doesn't want it to boil.
Not a full rolling boil. Some of the things that you can do with this, if you don't like celery, leave the celery out. If there's too much salt, leave the bouillon cube out. You could use leeks instead of onions. You can make it a thicker soup, almost like a stew. If you want, you could add diced ham. If you want to make it a full meal. We usually just have the potato soup and some kind of bread. I made some hot rolls yesterday, and we'll probably eat some of those with it.
Or ham biscuit or something that's
Yeah.
good with it. Nice wintertime dinner
All right.
to have.
That's about how thick we like this soup. Maybe a little bit thicker, but this will do. Some people like it really more soupy.
So now it's really taste because we haven't added the last three ingredients. One is salt. Of course, the bouillon had some, and the broth had some, and then pepper to taste, and parsley. And you can use dry, and since we dug this up and it's in the greenhouse, we can go right there and cut some and use fresh parsley. Well, we came over the other day, it's in the 20s. We officially got to 8 last night where we live. And this is their little parsley patch.
I'm just snipping away here.
Well, she's snipping away. It's still 66 right there. See you back in the kitchen.
I've got about half a cup of parsley here. It's not really packed down hard. If I push on it, you can see it's even less than that. And I turn it out here. And I know a lot of people use scissors to chop their parsley, but I get better results personally, less stem, if I kind of cut the leaves off and then use this pizza cutter. It's a pretty big one. And so I just kind of go through it. First time I try and hold on to the leaves pretty good. while I go through it. And it's easy to just kind of roll over this, and you can chop it up as small as you like, or have larger leaves of parsley. Alright, you always want to put this in. Notice that my soup is not boiling. It is still hot. It's still on the stove top. But you don't really want to boil the soup after you put the parsley in it. So then I just stir it around. And again, I go by taste. It looks like I don't have enough parsley in it. I go out and snip some more parsley off of our plants.
If you do dried parsley, you'd have to do it to taste. Probably start with this much, what, maybe a tablespoon?
Yeah, I would start with about a tablespoon and stir it around and see if it looked like it was enough. I use fresh ground pepper.
Because even in large bowls, you have, 8 or 10 servings here. We don't generally save or freeze much of this because it just disappears. And since the bouillon and the broth has salt in it, and you probably generally don't have to add any. And the old thing is like using your hands to cook with, because they're the best tools that you have, and your taste buds can tell you whether or not it's right or not.
As you can see, it's pretty hot. It's pretty good, but I'm probably going to add a little bit more salt to it.
What do you think that's going to be?
Probably
Teaspoon?
a teaspoon or so.
And that's it, folks. Not to make it too overly long. Say bye.
Bye.
Trying to get her on these videos like you asked for. And my job while all this was going on, because see, we're 1 hour and 3 minutes into this, is to have everything washed up. That's my cup, which has some Pepsi on it.